The thing about being underestimated is that people stop censoring themselves around you. They say things they shouldn't. They reveal patterns. They show you exactly how they think power works. After that moment, after the room quietly decided I was just admin, something shifted. Not outwardly. The music kept playing. Conversations resumed. Plates were cleared. But the way people spoke around me changed. They spoke freely. My sister leaned fully into her role as the center of attention. She moved from group to group, telling the same story in different tones, adjusting it slightly depending on who was listening. Each version made her sound more impressive. Each version made me smaller. And every time, she glanced in my direction. Not to check on me. To confirm I was still quiet. Her fiancé followed her for a while, smiling when expected, nodding when required. But his attention drifted. He watched interactions the way someone watches numbers on a screen, not faces. He noticed who deferred to whom. Who waited before speaking. Who didn't need to interrupt to be heard. People like that always notice me. At one point, someone asked him what he did. He answered clearly. Confidently. Not loudly. The room adjusted around his words. That contrast didn't go unnoticed. I stayed near the edge, accepting a glass of water when offered, thanking the server, listening more than I spoke. I could feel the narrative hardening around me, and that was exactly what I wanted. My sister eventually cornered me near the balcony doors. Her smile was tight now. Controlled. "You're being very quiet," she said, like it was a flaw. "I'm listening," I replied. She laughed softly. "You always say that." She meant it as an insult. I meant it as a skill. "You could at least try to look involved," she added. "People might get the wrong idea." I met her eyes. "About what?" Her smile flickered. Just for a second. "About ambition," she said. Ambition. Another label. Another assumption. Before I could answer, someone called her name, and she turned away, already distracted, already reassured that I hadn't challenged her. She never asked questions she didn't think she already knew the answers to. That's how she missed things. Her parents joined a group nearby, talking proudly about how well she'd done for herself. About how lucky the family was. About how everything was finally settling into place. I stood close enough to hear. Far enough to be ignored. They spoke about stability. About appearances. About how important it was to make a good impression tonight. They spoke like people who believed nothing unexpected could happen anymore. Belief like that makes people careless. The fiancé drifted closer again, holding his drink, eyes thoughtful. "You've known her a long time," he said, conversationally. "Since birth," I replied. He nodded slowly. "She speaks very confidently." "Yes." Another pause. "You don't," he said. I looked at him then. Not defensive. Not amused. Just present. "I speak when there's something to add," I said. That earned me a look. The kind people don't realize they give when something quietly recalibrates in their mind. He didn't push. Just nodded again and stepped away. That's when my sister escalated. She clinked her glass to get attention. Light taps. Enough to draw eyes. She raised her voice slightly, smiling wide. "I just want to say," she began, "how grateful I am to have such supportive people around me. Especially family. Even when they're behind the scenes." A few people chuckled. I didn't move. She continued, warming to the sound of laughter. "Not everyone needs to be in the spotlight, right? Some people are just better at managing things quietly." She gestured toward me again. Not subtle. Deliberate. Her parents smiled politely. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. The fiancé did not smile at all. I felt no heat rise in my chest. No urge to interrupt. This wasn't anger anymore. It was confirmation. She was building something she couldn't dismantle later. I caught the fiancé's eye across the room. He was watching her now, not with admiration, but with calculation. The smile he'd worn earlier had faded into something neutral. When the applause came, scattered and unsure, my sister beamed. She believed she'd won. She believed dominance was something you declared. She had no idea she'd just done the most useful thing she could have done for me. Because now everyone had heard it. When the evening wound down, goodbyes stretched long and polite. People hugged. Compliments were exchanged. Promises to meet again floated through the air. My sister was radiant. Her parents looked relieved. The narrative was intact. As people began to leave, her fiancé approached me one last time. "Can I ask you something?" he said quietly. "Yes." "What department did you say you worked in?" I looked at him steadily. "I didn't," I said. He studied my face. Not searching for arrogance. Searching for truth. He nodded once. "I thought so." And then he walked away. That was the moment. Not when she mocked me. Not when the room laughed. That was the moment I knew this wasn't going to unfold the way she expected. Because people who understand systems don't ask questions unless the answer matters. And he had just realized. It might. I left shortly after. No dramatic exit. No confrontation. Just a quiet goodbye and a calm walk out into the night. Behind me, the story remained exactly as my sister had told it. Ahead of me, something else was already in motion. And she still believed I was background. Which meant she wouldn't see what was coming. Losing quietly is the easiest way to make people believe you've lost completely. In the days after that night, nothing changed on the surface. No calls. No messages. No sudden apologies. My sister carried on exactly as she always had, posting photos, replying to comments, basking in the afterglow of attention. The engagement announcements went out. Congratulations poured in. Smiles everywhere. And my silence continued. From the outside, it must have looked like acceptance. Like I had taken my place and stayed there. That's the mistake people make. They assume silence is the end of the story. I went back to my routine. Same commute. Same desk. Same neutral expressions. If anyone from that gathering thought about me at all, they probably remembered me as the quiet one. The admin. The background figure. What they didn't see was how much information they had already handed me. Because the thing about systems, real systems, not social ones, is that they leave trails. Paper trails. Digital trails. Approval trails. And when you've spent years working inside them, you learn where those trails converge. I didn't rush. I didn't celebrate. I didn't plan revenge the way people imagine revenge. Loud. Emotional. Reactive. I waited. And while I waited, my sister did what she always did when she felt secure. She talked. She talked to friends. To relatives. To people who repeated things without realizing they were repeating them. Little details floated back to me without effort. Her fiancé worked in a sector that required clearances. Licenses. Oversight. The kind of work where compliance wasn't optional, it was everything. One wrong signature. One missing disclosure. One conflict left unreported. I filed the information away quietly. Not as ammunition. As context. Then came the invitation. A formal one this time. Not a casual gathering. A pre-wedding event tied to his professional circle. Sponsors. Senior figures. People whose opinions mattered beyond a single room. My sister was thrilled. She talked about it constantly. About how important it was. About how everything needed to be perfect. She mentioned, casually, that I should come early. Just to help manage things, she said. You're good at that. I agreed. That's how false defeat works. You don't argue when people assign you a role that benefits you. The venue was larger. More polished. The kind of place where people spoke carefully and listened closely. I arrived early, exactly as asked, and did what I always did, observed. I watched how authority moved. Who waited for whom? Who signed what? Who deferred without realizing they were doing it? And I noticed something else. My access was broader than anyone realized. Because admin doesn't mean powerless. It means trusted. It means systems open when others don't even know there's a door. I didn't open any doors that weren't already open to me. I didn't cross any lines. I didn't do anything that wasn't already part of my role. I just paid attention. As the evening approached, I overheard a conversation between two guests discussing a recent review. Not negative. Not positive. Just, pending. Pending things are fragile. My sister floated through the room, radiant again, confident again. She didn't look at me once. She didn't need to. In her mind, I was exactly where I belonged. Her fiancé arrived later, sharper tonight. More focused. He greeted people with care. With awareness. He shook hands firmly. He listened before responding. When he saw me, there was a flicker of recognition. Not familiarity. Awareness. You're early, he said. I was asked to be, I replied. He nodded. That makes sense. That was all. No accusation. No curiosity. Just acknowledgement. From that moment on, I watched him more closely than I watched my sister. Because he was the variable she didn't understand. People like her believe control is about being seen. People like him know control is about knowing. As the event unfolded, everything went smoothly. Too smoothly. My sister basked in praise. Her parents glowed. The narrative was being reinforced again: successful couple, supportive family, nothing out of place. And I stayed invisible. That's when the first crack appeared. A document needed clarification. Nothing dramatic. Just a question. A signature that required confirmation. The kind of thing that could wait, unless someone knew it couldn't. The question came to me. Not because I demanded it. Because that's how systems work. I answered calmly. Factually. With references. The person asking nodded slowly. Right, they said. I thought so. My sister noticed the exchange from across the room. She frowned slightly, then dismissed it. No applause followed. No attention shifted. In her mind, nothing had happened. But something had. Because the room had just seen me operate without permission. And they remembered. The rest of the night passed without incident. Or at least, without visible incident. When I left, the same calm settled over me. No triumph. No excitement. Just certainty. The kind that comes when you realize the board is already set. And the other player is still admiring the pieces. From my sister's perspective, she had won again. From everyone else's perspective, nothing had changed. But from mine, the story had reached the point where losing was no longer possible. All that was left was timing. Timing is something you learn to respect when you understand consequences. After that event, I didn't move faster. I slowed down. Because when people feel secure, they rush. And when they rush, they leave doors open behind them. My sister became busier. Wedding planning consumed her. Vendors, fittings, guest lists. She spoke constantly about how overwhelming it was, how much pressure she was under, how much she was handling on her own. She loved saying that. On her own. What she didn't notice was how often her fiancé stopped correcting her. Not because he agreed. Because he was listening. I stayed exactly where I had been placed. Helpful. Reliable. Invisible. I responded to messages quickly. I handled logistics without drama. I asked no questions that weren't necessary. That's how you get entrusted with things people don't double-check. There was a week when documents moved back and forth more than usual. Approvals. Verifications. Routine reviews that suddenly weren't routine anymore. Nothing alarming. Nothing urgent. Just, careful. I watched the process tighten. Then one afternoon, I received a call I hadn't expected. It wasn't confrontational. It wasn't emotional. It was professional. A request for clarification. About overlapping roles. About disclosures that had technically been made, but not fully explained. I answered honestly. I always did. I didn't volunteer opinions. I didn't accuse. I didn't frame anything dramatically. I simply explained how things worked. The person on the other end paused longer than usual before thanking me. After that, the tone around my sister shifted. Not with me. Around her. People started asking her fiancé more questions. Detailed ones. Clarifying ones. The kind that aren't dangerous unless you've built your confidence on assumptions instead of facts. He handled them well. Calmly. Transparently. But he began asking questions of his own. Quiet ones. Private ones. I wasn't present for those conversations, but I didn't need to be. The atmosphere changed. Subtle delays appeared. Meetings that were usually quick stretched longer. Responses became measured. And still, my sister remained unaware. She interpreted the change as importance. As scrutiny that came with rising status. She complained about how people were suddenly so strict now that things were going well. She never considered that the scrutiny had always been there. She had just never been close enough to see it. One evening, she called me, irritated. Why are people suddenly looping you in? She asked. It's unnecessary. I kept my voice even. They asked. For what? Clarifications. She scoffed. About what? Processes. Silence. You don't need to get involved, she said finally. This is our thing. Our. I let the word pass without comment. I'm just answering when asked, I said. She exhaled sharply. Fine. Just, don't complicate things. Complications don't come from answers. They come from questions. And the questions had already started. The turning point didn't arrive with an argument or a revelation. It arrived with a meeting. A small one. Scheduled politely. Mandatory attendance. My sister dressed carefully for it. Confident. Composed. Certain this was just another formality. Her fiancé was quieter than usual that day. I was invited as well. Not as family. Not as support. As context. We sat around a table that wasn't meant to intimidate anyone. No raised voices. No accusations. Just facts being aligned. Someone spoke about roles. Someone spoke about responsibility. Someone spoke about oversight. And then a simple sentence changed the temperature of the room. We just want to make sure there's no misunderstanding, they said. About who holds what authority. My sister smiled automatically. She gestured toward her fiancé. He does, she said. Obviously. The person nodded. Yes. And administratively? There it was. That pause again. The one people don't notice unless they know what it means. I shifted. Not toward my sister. Toward me. I didn't speak. Not yet. Because this wasn't my moment to explain. It was my moment to exist. The fiancé looked at me then. Really looked. Not as background. Not as family. As placement. He swallowed once. Can you clarify? Someone asked him gently. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Then spoke carefully. She oversees compliance alignment, he said. Independently. The room adjusted. My sister turned sharply toward him. What? He didn't look at her. He looked at the table. I didn't realize, she said, laughing lightly. She's just admin. No one laughed back. The person across from her asked me calmly, would you like to confirm? I took a breath. Not because I was nervous. Because pacing matters. Yes, I said. That's accurate. The silence that followed wasn't dramatic. It was surgical. My sister's smile froze. Her parents stiffened. And for the first time, she realized something fundamental had shifted. The labels she had used so casually weren't hers to assign. And the room already knew it. That was when the balance tipped. Not with anger. Not with revenge. With clarity. And clarity is irreversible. Once clarity enters a room, it doesn't need to raise its voice. It just sits there. And waits for everyone else to catch up. The meeting didn't end dramatically. There was no confrontation, no accusations thrown across the table. People gathered their notes. Someone thanked everyone for their time. Chairs slid back softly. Conversations resumed in low tones. But nothing was the same. My sister stood up slowly, still holding on to the version of herself that had worked everywhere else. She tried to smile, to smooth it over with familiarity. This is being overcomplicated, she said lightly. She's family. She just helps out. No one corrected her. No one agreed either. That kind of silence lands harder than resistance. Her fiancé didn't meet her eyes. He was focused on the documents in front of him, reading them again as if they had changed in the last few minutes. They hadn't. Only his understanding of them had. Her parents looked unsettled. Not angry. Not embarrassed. Just disoriented. Like people realizing they'd been standing on a floor that wasn't as solid as they thought. As we walked out, my sister finally turned to me, her voice low and sharp. Why didn't you tell me? She demanded. I looked at her calmly. You never asked. That stopped her for a moment. Then her tone shifted. Softer. Controlled. You could have said something, she said. You made me look foolish. I didn't respond right away. Not because I didn't have an answer. Because I wanted to give her the truth, not the version that would start a fight. I didn't make you look like anything, I said. I stayed consistent. She stared at me like she was trying to locate the insult. Her fiancé finally spoke. Quietly. Carefully. This isn't about appearances, he said. It's about structure. She turned to him, disbelief flashing across her face. Structure? Since when does she? He held up a hand. Not aggressively. Just, firmly. I should have asked earlier, he said. That part is on me. That was the moment my sister realized she was no longer directing the conversation. Over the next few days, the consequences unfolded without drama. Requests for clarification became formal. Reviews became thorough. Assumptions were replaced with documentation. Nothing was taken away. Nothing was destroyed. Everything was simply verified. And verification doesn't care about confidence. My sister called me repeatedly. Sometimes angry. Sometimes pleading. Sometimes pretending nothing had changed. I answered when it was appropriate. I stayed factual. I didn't defend myself. I didn't justify my role. Because by then, my role no longer needed defending. Her fiancé grew distant, not from me, but from the narrative he had accepted too easily. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't cold. He was processing. Processing is uncomfortable when it reveals blind spots. One evening, he asked to speak with me privately. No accusations. No tension. Just honesty. I should have known, he said. The way you move. The way you don't explain yourself. I nodded. People don't usually notice until it matters. He exhaled slowly. She never saw it. No, I agreed. She never needed to. That landed. The wedding plans stalled. Not cancelled. Just paused. Dates became tentative. Conversations became careful. The momentum my sister relied on began to thin. She tried to regain control by talking louder. By rewriting the story again. By framing the situation as misunderstanding, jealousy, interference. But stories don't overwrite records. And records had already been reviewed. The final public moment came unexpectedly. Another gathering. Smaller than the first. More selective. Familiar faces. Familiar setting. My sister arrived tense. Polished, but tight. Her parents hovered close. Her fiancé stood slightly apart, thoughtful, reserved. Someone asked a question about the earlier meeting. Casual. Neutral. Before my sister could answer, he did. We clarified roles, he said simply. It was necessary. Then, almost as an afterthought, someone looked at me and asked, so what do you actually do? The same question. Different room. Different power. I answered with one word. The room went silent. Not shocked. Not confused. Aligned. My sister didn't look at me this time. She looked at the floor. Her parents' faces drained slowly, realization settling in layer by layer. In that moment, she knew. Not because I announced it. Not because I corrected her. But because the room no longer needed her version of the story. And there was nothing she could say to take it back. The truth had arrived quietly. And it was done. After that, nothing dramatic happened. No apologies. No speeches. No closure scene people expect. Things simply rearranged themselves. My sister stopped calling. Her parents became careful with their words. The wedding moved forward in a quieter way, stripped of the confidence it once carried. Not ruined. Just, grounded in reality. I went back to my life exactly as it was before. Same routine. Same calm. Same silence. The difference was this. No one reduced me again. I didn't win by humiliating her. I didn't need to. I let truth do what it always does when it's patient. It stands. And everyone else adjusts around it. I walked away unchanged. That's the cleanest kind of revenge.